Hello, I'm Caroline Marshall, and welcome to Bump to Business Owner, the podcast speaking to mums in business, you. I'll be in conversation with some of the most inspiring women and mothers in enterprise about their journey, how they created their successful businesses alongside raising their children, and what that looks like in work and family life. Hello and welcome back to today's episode of Bump to Business Owner. I am your host, Caroline Marshall, and please welcome Dr Dupé Burgess. Dupé is a medical doctor, keynote speaker, health tech founder, content creator, and online writer, and a mum of 3 young kids. She spent 8 years working as a medical doctor before transitioning into strategy consulting at BCG. Now as the founder of Bloomful, launched in 2021, a health tech on a mission to close the gender health gap and improve access to gynae care for women globally. It provides digital support for women dealing with common gynae health issues and has won multiple awards and grants over the past few years. As a leader, Dupé's biggest realization has been that attention is the new currency, and her role is to drive brand awareness. Over the past 3 years, she's built her career by openly sharing the highs and lows of entrepreneurship, offering candid insights into what it really takes to start and grow a business. Dupé is filled by 2 key missions: transforming women's health through Bloomful and leveraging her personal brand to not only amplify her impact, but also help other entrepreneurs to do the same. Welcome, Dupé. Wow. Honestly, you're a woman of many, many talents and skills, and I cannot wait to dive into all of these. Especially, I find transitioning from careers like doctors and the NHS super interesting. Maybe my mum was a nurse, so maybe it's that background. I just find it so interesting. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Really excited, and such a nice introduction as well.
So I love hearing about what was your journey like to become a doctor, and was that always your goal and dream to be that, and what happened for your first pivot?
Okay, so that's a big question with probably
it's a whole episode in itself, I'm sure.
Okay, so where do I start? Well, I come from a fairly medical family, I suppose. So my dad's a doctor, so I've always been around medicine. It becomes part of you. And my dad's very much a proud medic. He's actually only just given up his license age 75.
Really?
So yeah, it was always there. It's always been part of our lives. Dad was on call, or working in this hospital, or going to locum here or there. I grew up in Bedfordshire, and I'm one of 4, and I went to the kind of school that encouraged those types of careers, and I'm very lucky. I went to a girls' private school in Bedfordshire, so it was very expected that you would do something fairly professional, and you would sort of fulfill your, I guess, ambitions as far as you possibly could. So for me personally, I was always quite academic and fairly good at science, and to be honest, it wasn't because I was desperate to become a doctor, but I think there was nothing else that really grabbed me at the age of 16 or whatever. But I also knew that I wanted to have something or study for something that I could always fall back on and would always be part of my identity in a way. So it just felt like a good option in a world where there was nothing else screaming out at me.
It's interesting. I think it either puts you off being around, because my mum's a nurse, my husband's, both his parents were doctors, and neither of us have gone down that route. It either puts you off or you go down that route. And I think what stands out for me is like something safe. I had friends who went into teaching who definitely thought that as well. It's something you think you can do around a family. Did you even think about that at that age? I didn't, but did you?
Not necessarily from the family angle. I definitely thought that as a woman, I wanted to have something that I could always hold on to and always fall back on, no matter what happens in the world, what country you go to. Being a doctor, being a medic, it's always something that people need and will want, and healthcare is always going to be desirable. So I thought about it from that perspective, and I could always make a living out of it. I think that's really the angle that I came at it from, and I also wanted something that I felt would push me academically as well. So just felt like
what did you specialise in? Because you've gone down the women's health route. Was it women's health?
Yeah, so I went to King's College London, and I obviously just did the normal degree. I also have another degree in anatomy, a BSc in human anatomy as well. Left university, started as a junior doctor in South East London, did that for a few years. I did core medical training, which is the training path for basically physicians, and I was a general adult medical clinician. I worked as the dreaded medical registrar, who's the person that usually runs around the hospital with a crash bleep in hand. And that's actually when I decided to leave. I decided for a number of reasons. It just wasn't a career that I wanted to stay in forever. I felt quite disenchanted working in the NHS. It's a very, very hard working environment from not because you're working hard necessarily, but it's a really thankless job, to be honest. And I just felt like the downsides were starting to outweigh the positives. Like, it's a real privilege being a doctor, but I felt that I wanted a bit more autonomy and a bit more freedom, and I wanted to sort of create my own path rather than having this very prescriptive pathway laid out in front of me. And so, yeah, I decided to jump ship.
And you clearly have that entrepreneurial streak in abundance. So I think, especially, I'm sure you get this in any country, but I only know the NHS and have worked in it. There's a huge infrastructure there, and I guess you just feel that's the path, and it's hard to break free out of that. Had you become a mum, or had you started your family journey at this point as well?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay.
No, at this point I was still pretty much on my own. I think late 20s is when I decided to jump ship. I think the biggest push for me was actually meeting my boyfriend at the time, now husband of many, many years. But we've been together for a really long time. I just remember when we first met, which was probably we're going back to like 2012, and he was like really struck by how much I wasn't enjoying the day-to-day of being a doctor. I remember he would have to like push me out of the house on Saturday night when I had my night shift, and I would be like just dreading it all day and dreading going in on a Monday. And I think he saw that, and having those fresh eyes was actually really helpful for realizing that that wasn't normal, and I didn't need to feel like that. And he was actually the first person to be like, have you thought about just doing something else, because life's short, and if you don't really enjoy it enough, there's lots out there to do. So that was the first time I thought, you know what, yeah, maybe I will actually explore something else.
What did your parents think of it? I'm dying to know now. Your dad's a doctor until recently.
Yeah, that was interesting. So my strategy was that I wouldn't say anything until I actually had another job lined up. So
I love that. In our late 20s, we still feel that fear. We're like, no, I'll come in with a positive when it.
No, definitely. I mean, I'm Nigerian by background, and like anyone that listens to this that is Nigerian or knows Nigerian parents know that you don't turn up at your parents' house and go, I've just jacked my job in. So yeah, my strategy was definitely, I locumed for a long while to figure out what I wanted to do, and then I knew that I wanted to transition into something that I felt was kind of on par with where I'd been and wasn't too much of a step back. I didn't want to go and study anymore. I'd done so much studying. And so strategy consulting felt like a really good next step. And then of course I had to actually get a role in consulting, which is, as you probably know, really hard, especially for like those top firms. And so to answer your question, I waited until I had a next step, set in stone before I went home. And then I went home and was like, okay, I've got some news. I'm leaving medicine. However, I have a job lined up, and it's at BCG. And of course, like, they were really happy with that.
Oh, good. And they're like, no, it's okay. I had a plan and I've gone with it. Did you? I don't know what it's like to go. Consulting into BCG. Is it like? Do a lot of doctors pivot into that if they leave it? How does it work?
So I definitely think it's one of the routes that people can take. I wouldn't say it's like the most common. Actually, when I was leaving medicine, it felt like I was one. I mean, it felt like I was the only one. It wasn't at a time when it was so openly talked about amongst doctors to just leave the career. I felt really awkward about it actually for a really long time. Didn't speak to any of my colleagues about it. I always felt quite like, not ashamed, but like I'd let people down, or that because I was leaving, I was like a sellout or something. So I felt it was a really difficult time. And actually, the passage of time makes you forget a lot of what that feeling was. But when I think back at it properly, it was a really hard transition to come out of that career. It's like leaving the army, it's like part of your DNA. And so when I wanted to figure out where I was going next, I was, thinking, do I go to law conversion, law school and convert into that? Or, do I want to go back to uni? Not really. What are the different careers? And actually my brother, who at the time had just finished working at Goldman Sachs, he was a trader for quite a number of years, and he'd gone to business school in Boston, and lots of people were talking about consulting. It's like quite a big thing that they do. And he said to me, like, have you thought about consulting? And I was like, don't really know what that is, but I'll look into it. And that's when I started,
quick Google.
Yeah, quick Google. That's understand about it. And of course, me being me, if I was going to do consulting, I wanted to do it at one of the top firms. And there's three like big firms that people talk about. It's like the magic 4 or whatever it is in accounting, or like a magic circle law firm. It's that kind of thing. Super hard to get into. Very, very, very tough process that took months and months of preparation. So yeah, it was really difficult, like 1% acceptance rate, and I worked my socks off to get that role. So yeah, it was hard.
Amazing. Well done. It must have been transition for your life as well, because I've read enough about people who've been in the NHS who are, it is your life, isn't it, when you're a junior doctor and working all those hours. It must have been such a life change for you.
Massive life change. I mean, I'd spend my days wearing scrubs and like my blood-stained Converse, disgusting, I know, but yeah, going from that to like dressing smartly and going into the city and taking into, Marylebone, which is Bond Street, which is where
Very different places in London, I imagine, from the
yeah,
hospitals. Yeah.
very different, super different, and it takes some getting used to, but it was also really exciting. I was absolutely thrilled to have landed in this role and to finally be able to make that pivot. And to your earlier question, there were a few doctors working in the office. I definitely wasn't the only one. There are a number of doctors that had done that transition, and a few dentists. And I think in consulting, they want people from different backgrounds. There are people from the military there are people from, law, researchers, Olympians, all sorts. So really nice, diverse in terms of where people have come from, in terms of career, setting to be in. So yeah, really interesting.
So Bloomful, how did that come about then, and when? Well, 2021 that launched. When did your light bulb moment come for it?
So I was in consulting for a few years and never quite like clicked with it. It was just I realized how mission driven I am, and that I really have to be brought into the problem, and really I'm somebody that's very principled, and I've got a lot of personal values, and I want to be doing something that I find very, I don't know, worthwhile in that way. And that was something I missed about medicine when I was in consulting. Because in medicine, despite the highs and lows of the job, you're always feeling like you're doing something that's worthwhile.
Yeah.
And so in consulting, I never like loved it. I learned a huge amount, but my biggest thing was just understanding that I wanted to build something that was more meaningful for me and that I could own myself. And so after a few years, I think COVID hit, and I just wanted to do something, go into something that I felt was super worthwhile. And people were starting to talk more about women's health. I think 2020 was an interesting year because we were all in COVID. I was pregnant with my second child at that year.
Oh, wow.
Lots of people talking about inequality in so many different ways, COVID, and I think like the George Floyd issue came up in that year. And so for me, I was like going deep into healthcare inequality and like what that means and how that's impacted my practice and all of that. And that's really where the idea materialized from. I started to learn so much more about how how women are disadvantaged in healthcare in so many different ways, and that's where it came from.
Do you think it's kind of been just a light bulb in general the past few years that we've all woken up to this, and it's still like, I think I saw a reel the other day that was 1993. They actually started doing medical health, what's it called? Research on women. Was that right? And it is like, we're like, oh, that's not okay. And we've all woken up to that, and thank goodness there's people like you, more knowledgeable, that can also like drive change in this as well. So you mentioned you were pregnant with your second in COVID. What was that like? Was there anything that your lived experience brought into starting Bloomful as well?
So I'd had my son whilst at BCG, whilst I was in consulting, and then 2020 I was pregnant with my daughter, and I don't think it was like a direct thing. To be honest, I had really good experiences of all pregnancies. I'm so lucky, touch wood, that I've always had really good experience and no issues or anything like that. But I was always aware, and I was becoming more aware that year about the inequalities that specifically Black women have when it comes to childbirth. And like, I was reading a lot of that stuff at that time, and being pregnant at the time was really quite alarming. And
that
really
puts more fear in you, I guess. I mean, we all need to know about it. Just for anyone who isn't aware listening, it's 5 times more likely.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that.
More likely
Yeah.
than white women to die in or around the childbirthing period. Babies who are non-white also more likely to die in the perinatal period or during childbirth. So yeah, I remember distinctly that year reading that and learning so much more about that, seeing a lot of it on social media and thinking, gosh, this is really quite shocking. Why didn't I know about this?
Yeah, as a doctor, you're like, oh,
Yeah, exactly. And then also being pregnant with my daughter then, it does play on your mind. And I'm lucky that I live in Southwest London and I've got private insurance and I've got really good hospitals nearby. But what about those that don't and don't have that facility and also don't have a voice? Because I'm also lucky that I'm privileged that I can speak up for myself and I can advocate for myself. But it's scary to think that a lot of women can't in that.
yeah. And even if you think you can, you're put in a different situation where you're like, you are put, like a lot of women who have not been in a hospital ever or for someone dying, and then they're suddenly there for pregnancy, and it's like they don't know how to use their voice in that scenario as well.
Different kettle of fish being pregnant, being in labour.
Yeah.
I mean, it's your everything goes out the window. You're so vulnerable. You're kind of doing what
Yeah, vulnerable. I think that's it. For a lot of women, it can be the first experience of being vulnerable, which isn't a nice feeling if you've never experienced that.
definitely, definitely. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's a super interesting time, but definitely drove me more towards wanting to build in that space. And so after I had my daughter Ruby, which was at the end of 2020,
Nice.
so yeah, I guess it definitely drove me further towards wanting to do it. And then after I had my daughter, the following year is when I decided to start, really trying to figure out what's what, essentially.
Love it. So yeah, 2021. So you were on your maternity leave. So have
Call it that.
so with your second, I guess what's maternity leave look like? With your first, were you on maternity leave from BCG, but those two you were
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
juggling entrepreneurship.
Yeah, first one I was on maternity from BCG, and obviously that's my first experience of maternity leave. And to be honest, I was ready to go back when I went back. I was like, these coffee shops.
Did you do baby sensory? Were you done with it?
Yeah, a little bit of, like the yoga stuff, but to be honest, I don't know if that's really for me. I kind of, it's not. It was nice while it lasted, but the other two didn't get that treatment. I think my experience of baby yoga and all of that with my first was enough for me. But with Ruby, yeah, I mean, it was interesting because I had I think 3-year-old and Ruby, and we were still like in and out of lockdown that first year. It
Yeah.
was like a really strange time, wasn't it? And it was, um, yeah, I remember there being a time when I felt like she hadn't met any of my family, and it was definitely very different and very odd.
That December 2020, it was like that. I remember a friend came over because I was in a bad place, and she was like, "Your mum hasn't met him yet?" And I was like, "No," like because she was like in a vulnerable category on her own, and I was like, "No," like it was you had that like months when no one met your kid. It was quite odd, wasn't it? And you kind of forget that, and it's always. Yeah, I think good to talk about it because I think we're starting to learn to talk about this stuff more, which feels wild, like 4 years in, I guess. But so how did you manage it starting Bloomful with all?
I mean, it was a slow start. I mean, it was that first year was definitely mainly me at my kitchen table talking to women and really getting a sense of what their experience was.
Is that how you started? You just
Yeah.
information gathered, research.
Information gathering. I was setting up calls left, right, and centre with lots of different women. I was going to sort of advocacy groups and Facebook groups and finding people who wanted to talk about their experience, primarily of things like endometriosis and polycystic ovary syndrome, fibroids, all of those conditions that are often just not really talked about enough, or historically weren't. I think much more open about it now, but I wanted to just hear people's experience, menopause, perimenopause, and putting all that into my kind of vault of information, and then using that to try and figure out what kind of solution might help those women to get an earlier diagnosis or get better management. I also did a couple of accelerators that year which were really helpful for just immersing myself in the tech space and meeting people, and I spent time looking for a co-founder. That didn't work out, and just really trying to get a sense of what this ecosystem is about. So super slow start, nothing too strenuous. I was also talking to investors to get a sense of what they would invest in, why, at what kind of milestones, that kind of thing. I remember having a lot of calls with like my down here with the baby, like down here breastfeeding, and like having the camera up here, and it was, and calls with her kind of in the, what do you call it, little carrier thing.
Yeah, sling.
So it was fine, and it was good. It was just a nice, easy entry, I suppose, into the tech space.
Yeah, I love that. And did you know any friends who are founders or anything? Was this completely all a new space to you to learn the lingo, learn about investment, how to even build something?
Yeah, completely new. So all of my network, primarily at that stage, was probably still in the medical sphere. I had some BCG colleagues as well, but no one I know that had really done anything in tech. I didn't know much about any of that space. I had to learn it all from scratch and build up my own network, which, by the way, that is a job in itself and something that is really worthwhile, because I think it's great to have peers that are doing the same thing. But I had to start that from scratch and build that from the bottom up, essentially.
Wow, amazing. And how did you decide? So just to explain everyone what Bloomful does now, you work with the NHS and private practices?
Yeah, so we are a digital mobile application, essentially. We are a digital therapeutic app, so we support women who have these conditions by providing things like pelvic physio, pain psychotherapy, nutritional support, and we do it in a very personalised way through an app. So super easy to access, much easier than going to a pelvic physio or waiting 6 months to see a psychotherapist or whatever it might be. And the idea is that we're supporting women with evidence-based therapies that are typically and often not available to them, either because there are long waiting lists, or because location-wise they're not available, or because the doctors, God bless them, just don't have the resource or the time to understand how to make the referral or do the referral or anything. So we're trying to offer it through an app, and we're trying to be reimbursed by the NHS. So we're currently piloting with a number of GPs, which is going well.
Amazing. And does it help you kind of advocate for yourself as well? So because you're
Yes.
starting to learn the right things to say, because I think that's unfortunately still a thing.
It really is a thing. And yes, it does, through education, which is a huge pillar within the app. I think a lot of the issues that we come up against with women's health are because we just don't have the words, the education, the understanding of our bodies to really feel like we can challenge or push for things that we think we need, or, as you say, advocate for ourselves. And a lot of what we do at Bloomful comes down to educating the individual. We also do education in organisations as well. So through all of that, we hope that women feel that they can advocate for themselves much better than they otherwise could.
Well, it's crazy. I just had a chat with a friend the other day, and she was like, "Oh, I'm teaching them to say the word vagina," and you never know how the other parent's going to react to it or person. As a doctor, I feel like you're in the same club of like teaching the right anatomy, and I'm like,
No, I'm very particular about my kids knowing what, we're not talking about just willies and foo-foos or whatever else it is.
yeah, it's the fact there isn't a female name for it. Let's just use vagina and vulva, and I think none of most of our generation, we weren't taught that, and our parents are a bit like, oh gosh, but that's the start of it, isn't it?
Definitely, it starts there, because if you can't express exactly what a body part is, then you're not going to be able to, very clearly express to somebody if something goes wrong, or if you feel vulnerable in any way, or if you're worried about something. So, my 4-year-old talks about her vulva, and that's
Good.
it. There's
Good.
no other
Good.
person as well. I think it's important for both boys and girls.
Oh yeah, my boys. I've got 2 boys, so we're very clear in our household. Although it doesn't necessarily mean they use the right language, but I'm trying my best, is what I'm trying to say. It is amazing to hear. And how did you get, so just investment on that side of things, did you go down an investment route? How did that work out? Because you did some accelerators. Was there anything attached to those?
Not on the investment side. I don't think there was anything on the investment side, but they were definitely great for knowledge and networking and understanding the whole space and preparing for investment as well. So yeah, by the time, 2022, I was pregnant again with my third child. Yeah, that was the year that I was raising investment. So by this time, I had a good concept of what the products needed to be, although we have pivoted quite a number of times since then. But at the time, I had a good proposition. We'd done a lot of testing. We definitely had some paid customers by that stage. So I felt like I had enough to go out and find investments specifically to take us to what I considered to be the next milestone. 2022 was that year, and it was really hard, really difficult to be fundraising whilst pregnant, as a woman, as a black woman, as a solo founder in quite a difficult space. I like doing hard things, but
Yeah, you're like, I am ready. If there was anyone, it's going to be you, Dupé.
and I basically spent the whole well, about 6 months of that year talking to investors, like it was really tough. But we also had some really great things happen. I remember Google invested through one of their funds, which was
Wow.
amazing. And that really gave me confidence to push forward and keep getting more people on the cap table. And we won quite a few other awards and competitions, and putting it all together, managed to create like a small round. Get
Amazing.
amazing angel investors as well that year. So yeah, it was cool.
Amazing. Did you ever feel, what was kind of any hard points where you were like, I don't know about this, or were there any meetings where you're like, this is wrong, this isn't going to work out with them?
Yeah, I remember thing in particular was a group of angel investors who wanted to invest, but they were, I mean, it was quite a small amount in the grand scheme of things, how much they were willing to invest. But they were like taking up so much of my time, due diligence, and asking all these super awkward questions. And I remember getting to a point where I was like, do you know what, this actually is just not worth it. I just don't, there's something that just doesn't feel right about how much they are delving into and what they're looking for and what they want. And I just remember they were like giving me all these weird contracts, and I just didn't understand any of it. And obviously I don't have the funds to go and get all these solicitors and lawyers to like look at all these contracts. And I just remember thinking, you know, I'm going to go with my instincts and I'm going to step away from that particular investment. And that was something that I, to this day, never regret doing, because actually if it doesn't feel right, or if something feels like it's just off, or it just doesn't quite align with what you're seeing through with your peers or with other investors, often it's just not going to be the right thing for you. And investors are people that are going to be, you know, with you on this journey for a really long time. And so if it doesn't feel right, I think I learned to just step away.
Yeah, I went to an event the other day where it said with angels, it's really that they should have the passion for it, willingness to lose their money, but the passion for your business, because it's not the same as VC funding where they just need the money back. So, and that is right. They clearly didn't have a passion for it if they were delving too far into it and had heavy contracts even you didn't understand.
You get a sense for like where the balance is, or what the temperature is, and it just, you know, when something just feels a bit off. And I think there are people out there that will try and take advantage, or try and take too much, or try and like dupe you, or, you know, pull the wool over your eyes or something. And if you get the inkling that there's anything shifty going on, it's just not worth the hassle, the effort. You'll always be able to find other people who will invest in you if you look hard enough and for long enough.
That's great advice, because there is sadly some shifty, and I've heard enough stories, and even stories where people have lost quite a lot of money, and like it's been awful, and they have done things right. You know, it's not to scaremonger, but it is right to also trust your instincts when people are giving you money if it feels wrong. And Dupé, so we talked a lot about finding your community and finding your network, and I think, well, you are an example who's done that amazingly, because on LinkedIn especially, your presence is just fantastic, and it clearly shows in your personal brand now. It's, you know, not just about Bloomful, it's what you also offer as an individual. And you say attention is the new currency, which I love. What has building your personal brand been like in practice? Because like you can just, that takes work.
It's definitely not easy, but I would say it's massively paid off. So about a year ago now, I had never posted on LinkedIn, pretty much.
A year ago? Stop it.
I'm not
You're all over my feed every day now. Yes, I can't believe that.
I'm like, oh God, am I?
In a good way. I'll say that. I know the cringe. It's there still. Is it still there? That makes me feel better if it's still there.
It's still there. I had posted maybe once when Google invested in us. I'd posted to announce that, which was, you know, it felt like it was okay. I felt okay posting it because it's a great piece of news. But apart from that, I'd never posted. However, I did have a real kind of understanding or inkling that I was potentially missing out on opportunities by not posting. And I can't remember why I felt that, but I remember texting people, like friends or peers, being like, oh my God, I need to start posting on LinkedIn, but it's just so cringe and I just can't do it. And I should probably go back and find some of those messages and screenshot them, because obviously the difference with now is like...
Also with the date on. They need the date on, please. Yeah. I think that.
But, you know, there came a point where I was like, do you know what, I just need to rip the plaster off and start doing this. And, you know, I'll start small. And so I actually won an award last April, and I took that as my opportunity to post. And then I actually made the conscious decision that from that moment, I would start trying to post fairly consistently. So I posted my award announcement, and then I started posting every 2 or 3 days after that. So I was posting maybe like 2 or 3 times a week, and that was okay. You know, I was getting decent enough engagement. I started to grow. I probably had like 1,000 followers at that point, or 2,000 or something. But it got to the point where I was like, do you know what? Even writing one post on LinkedIn takes time and effort. You know what it's like. You know, it could take you all morning to write a LinkedIn.
And then you're like, oh no, this is going to be offending. You know, you read into it then, don't you, as well?
You guess yourself, you come back to it, you know, I'll do a bit of work and I'll read it again before I post. And before you know it, it's taken all day to do this post. And I thought, do you know what, if I'm going to do that, fine, but I want to learn how to use LinkedIn properly and actually get as much return for the time I spend writing posts as I can. And so I basically dove in with feet first, and was like, I'm going to immerse myself in it and do it properly. I started posting every day. I learned much more about what the platform is all about, and how to actually make the most of the platform and the algorithm, and try and get as much engagement as I can, and, you know, basically just trying to optimize it as much as I possibly could. And that's been the journey since about last summer, I guess. You know, since about August, that's really where I started to see things pick up properly, and I've just kind of grown ever since. You know, it's not easy growing a personal brand. It's definitely not easy putting yourself out there, being so visible. But the return has been literally life-changing, and I'm actually not trying to be hyperbolic. You know, it's been way more than I thought it could ever be from getting...
That's what I want to know. What have you got in return for this? Tell us the secrets.
Well, you know, different things. So there's myself, Dupé, and then there's the business, and obviously the two interconnect. But from the business perspective, you know, lots of business leads, lots of opportunities to share what we're doing with different stakeholders who are interested in Bloomful as a business, which is great. We're hopefully about to close a commercial contract with a company based on them essentially seeing me on LinkedIn and following up there. So, you know, just from that perspective, it's been really good. But beyond that, speaking opportunities, I was already somebody that liked public speaking, but I think just the exposure I've had from LinkedIn means that people see me a lot more, and then therefore are more likely to ask me to come to events and give a speech or a keynote or to host something. And so I've been able to earn extra income through that as well. Podcasts,
Well, yeah.
Just, you know, I've been on a couple before, but I think, again, just the exposure, people see you and are more interested in hearing more about your story and things like that. I've been on a billboard. I've done some coaching on, you know, different aspects of being a founder and personal brand and all of that kind of thing. So it's been like multifaceted, and it's been quite nice because it's helped the business, but it also helped me to diversify what I'm doing, which is super interesting, and build other income streams as well through it. So huge leverage on all fronts, I would say. And now I'm a really big advocate for people growing their brand, especially women, because I think women need to be more present, frankly.
Oh, yeah. Weren't there some LinkedIn stats the other day? What did you see them? It was a crazier percent. Like, I clearly cater my feed too much. A crazy percent of the top voices are men. And I was like, really? But of course, I shouldn't be surprised. But I was still like, really? So yeah, it's a thing. More women should be doing this.
Yeah, totally. I didn't see those statistics, but I mean, even just anecdotally looking at it, I can see that most of the top, what do you call them, like creators on LinkedIn.
Yeah, they have top voice label or something. I don't know if that's a thing, but
exactly, top voices. I think the most prominent people with the most followers, like they do tend to be, you know, guys essentially, and you know that's fine. But we need, you know, it correlates to business opportunities, it correlates to speaking opportunities, it correlates to extra revenue, so the gap widens, and so that's why I'm really, I guess, passionate about bringing women into the fold and getting visibility for them too.
I love that. And I think that's so what many don't realise is that content can bring other revenue streams, even if it's indirectly. And that's why it's so important, and what you've clearly done a great job of. You know, I saw in your most recent newsletter, actually, it was really helpful. You gave some tips in there. I'm going to shout that out. But you talked about the importance of not being tied to a job, career and title. And do you think this is included in the fact now you've got the personal brand as well as Bloomful?
Well, I think for me, it's like I am a person first and foremost, outside of being a mother, outside of being a founder at Bloomful, outside of being a medical doctor. Like, I'm a person that has all of these different facets. So, of course, I will always be titled tied to Bloomful, and I'm a founder first and foremost in terms of work. But what I think is that there are other founders of health tech companies who aren't me. They will have different experiences of me than I will. And so I want to share my journey in different ways. I've been a doctor, I've been a strategy consultant, I've been a mum, I am a mum. So I just think it's like that constellation of experiences makes the individual the individual. And I don't feel like I need to be pigeonholed as just being somebody that talks about women's health. I love that topic and I could talk about it all day, but I could also talk about career changes because I've had a few. I could also talk about being a mum because I've got a
few of those.
I can also talk about personal brand because I've learned to grow mine fairly quickly. So I just think some people think, oh, well, I am a marketing person, so I can only talk about marketing. And that's personally not how I like to kind of think about it. I think about it as, what's Dupé about? What are the 5 or 6 different things that make me who I am, and which of those do I want to put forward and showcase, essentially?
But don't you think then it's easier to change and pivot as well? Because you as Dupé, you're constantly changing as a person. We realise that as we get older, that's the thing. But I think if you get so tied, which I think we do when we're younger, I hate to say it, like tied to a career, tied to being something. I trained as a singer once and it kind of felt like a huge big deal to walk away from it, and then realised I had a whole life beyond that. And it is that realization. I do think it's a good thing not to be tied to one thing.
100%. And I did a post about that. I think in the newsletter I highlighted it. The post was talking about how you should really, in my opinion, tie your actions to your personal values and your personal kind of life mission. And if you do that, it doesn't really matter whether you're a founder or whether you're, a singer or whether you're a doctor or whatever it is, because if you've got if the common ground is around your personal values, then it doesn't really matter what you do. I think as somebody who has left a very, very vocational career, I've learned that actually everything is very labile. Bloomful might not, touch wood, everything's going fine now, but it may not exist in 2 or 3 years. And I don't want then, if that, I don't want that to just be my identity, because you just don't know what the future holds. So I think it's just good to diversify. And the other thing I've learned is that even if someone calls me up to talk about, to give a talk about something or a keynote, I can still talk about my business and I can still bring up Bloomful, and I can still, they may see me on LinkedIn talking about careers, but when I come to a different scenario or a different stage, I can talk about my business. And there are always ways to mix everything up so it's beneficial in all directions, basically.
Exactly that. And even if Bloomful wasn't around, it'll still be you'll still talk about it because it was part of the journey with you as well. And I'd love to know, I think sometimes in women listen to this podcast, we're just desperate to know how you've managed to do it all with 3 kids. And it comes from, I know we talked about this question a bit in the beginning of this podcast, because I've always had it from a place of being a really good thing, just from other women desperate to know how do you manage it? What sort of childcare do you have in place? How does Dupé and your family manage this? Because I think so many women are always desperate to know if there's a secret, which I don't think there is.
No, definitely no secret, unfortunately. And I also don't like to give off the perfect vibe, everything just runs really smoothly and perfectly, because it absolutely doesn't, sadly.
Shall we share what happened as we joined the call?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I was on the call to Dupé joined and I was on the phone call to the school because I wasn't happy about something, and Dupé had some cream, was it a 2-year-old dropped some cream, so both of us joined the call going
Yeah, exactly. I opened the door of my office and my 2-year-old's managed to get hold of my husband's face cream and smeared it into the carpet, and I'm just like, Maya, come on, why? A few minutes before I meant to be starting a podcast. But
so both of us, that was the reality. So both of us being like, oh, hi, we need to do this.
You have to pull yourself together and just get on with it and just put it out of your mind and sort it out later. But to your question, childcare wise, so I've got 3 kids. They are 7, 4 and 2, and obviously my 7-year-old's at school, so that's good. But my two daughters, they have a child. Well, my auntie actually comes and looks after them at my house Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And obviously was on the toilet when Maya was.
Always when you're not looking, yeah. She took advantage.
She should be unsupervised for more than about 3 seconds because she's into everything. But
I think that's always really good reality to share, because I think there's some women who think they should be able to work while juggling that, and there's always a child that's living proof, at least one child that you cannot.
she's definitely not it for that. So my auntie who lives not too far from me comes and looks after my daughters Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, and then they go to preschool nursery on Thursday and Friday.
Oh,
So
lovely.
that's kind of the split on the girls, and like I said, my son's at school, and I've got a brilliant husband who, and their dad who is great. I mean, when I say great, he does what he needs to do in terms of his share, which is, I think, is part of the battle, is actually having kids with someone that comes in on it 50-50, right?
Yeah, I think Rachel from Corey Kid, she's been on the podcast. She said you can't tell younger women to like choose their partner well, or someone who's not in that partnership, that they should have chosen someone who you knew would be on that journey with you. But it is that for ones who aren't in it yet, like you got to choose your partner well if this is the life you want together.
They need to be in on it, and he works super hard, but also does a lot of the sort of dropping off, and he picks the girls up from preschool, nursery, and he's quite flexible in his work as well to a degree. So
is he self-employed or employed?
He's actually employed, but they're really good. He actually got 6 months of paternity, or is it? Sorry, I should be saying parental leave when I had my daughter, which was brilliant because I was able to sort of get straight back to work.
You're like, here you go, your turn. Oh, that's amazing. I love hearing stories. So has he had that with all three, or just one of them?
Only with the last one, which I kind of actually worked out quite well because I was on maternity with my oldest, and that. So, I think to your question, we share a lot. We kind of divide the household stuff in ways that work well for us. We definitely lean into our strengths. I'm not into cooking. I hate.
Me neither. That's a real theme on this podcast, that we're quite happy with the setup if we're not cooking. And there's a lot of us on here that don't do the cooking. It's great. You're my people, clearly.
Exactly. You attract those people.
Yeah.
I've definitely never been the person that does cooking, and he really loves it. So that works nicely, for example. Whereas I'm really into logistics. Like, I want to be the person that's doing all the shuffling and, mental kind of acrobatics of who goes what, where, how, and why. And organising, that's my bag. So I take that bit on, and, we kind of divide up other things as required, and we try and be amenable to each other in terms of what's needed.
I think sometimes it's not going to work out, and you're just, we're human, and that's the thing. Then other times it could be like, we're nailing this at the
Exactly. That's it. And I think the other big thing is like, my kids are very self-sufficient, especially for their ages. I've always been very kind of like, okay, you've got 2 arms, you can make your bed, you've got hands, you can fold your pajamas. And they're quite good at, getting up in the morning and opening curtains, making bed, doing all the bits they need to do, brushing their teeth.
Amazing.
Yeah, I've tried to like really instill that stuff. My son is brilliant. He's the first person downstairs in the morning, gets himself breakfast, sorts all that out. So
okay, revenue stream for you now is to set up a course teaching this for parents. So there we go. You're welcome. That's your next thing, is to teach us all how to get there. Because I don't have to say I'm trying.
It's definitely a stepwise process, but it massively helps though, because I feel like. My 4-year-old, for example, like she gets agitated when there's something that shouldn't be where it is now, because I've kind of, she not agitated, but she kind of notices when things are out of place, and she'll go and pick them up and put them back. I'm just like, cool, that's
cool, sorted. Off you go do the shopping. Okay. Oh, I love that. And you're clearly you're on your way with your founder's journey and loving it. Has there been anything that you thought, okay, I'm just going to go back to employment? Or you're like, no, this is it, I'm in it?
I can't even envisage ever going back to employment. No way. No, not for me. I don't ever, when I left BCG and I was like, I will never, as long as I live, get a CV together for anybody or anything. Like, I'm just...
Oh, good goal.
That's the goal, exactly. My life goal is to never have to dig up some CV or create a CV. No, I think I'm an entrepreneur through and through, and I will probably build some different things. I've still got a whole life ahead of me, and you never know where that will go. But I honestly think like the world that we're living in definitely gears more towards solopreneurship, entrepreneurship, and just working in that kind of independent way more and more, I think. Obviously, we'll always need employees in different scenarios and stuff.
And some people suit that, like the structure, and it's hard for us to imagine, but some people do. But it is, especially, you're in the same early years as me. I can't imagine having that stress of being tied to something like that. If something kicks off at home, that I just need to, it's easier to juggle a business, weirdly. Yeah, definitely.
I think even doing this, it's hard enough, but I think I'll look back on this time and be really grateful that I've always been able to, be here when my son gets back from school, or when my daughters get in from nursery, and see them off in the morning. And I think if I was working in consulting still, honestly, it would just...
Oh, that'd be long hours, wouldn't it? I love that. Oh, well, something we love to end on at the minute is a theme of joy, because I went through a whole journey of finding it again for myself, finding dance and theatre, and I am so passionate that as women we should be finding that more, because we can be there for others if we have our own joy, and it helps. It's so much easier in life. How has you found that as a mother? Has it changed at all? Did you rediscover your own selfish joy away from the family business?
I don't know yet. I think this is probably something I need to work on, because I'm such a workaholic, and I actually genuinely enjoy the work that I do and all the different facets. I love it. So I feel like it's been hard for me to find something that's separate or do I even need to? I feel like I'm still working this out, whether I need to, and if I should spend more time thinking about things outside of that are joyful. But honestly, my work brings me a lot of joy, and I love waking up in the morning knowing that this is what I'm doing, and I'm hopefully contributing something meaningful and having the autonomy to do what I want to do. I mean, besides that, I love anything that involves the sun. I love, something that really does bring me joy is feeling the heat of the sun on my face. I know this is going to sound odd.
Well, you must be missing that in South London. So I am in North.
I mean, look at the grey outside. And so I love going abroad. I love travelling. I love just peace and quiet and being on my own and feeling that sun. That's the ultimate in joy for me.
Can you switch off if you're feeling the sun on your face? Is that how you switch off the best?
I can. And I'm somebody that finds it difficult to switch off, but that is a moment where I can just be like, oh my gosh, this is divine. I just love it. I'm such a sun worshipper, so I shouldn't be saying that as a doctor. Sun cream.
You can sun worship with sun cream on, and also so you do have your thing. It's just a bit further for you. You just can't do it every day in England unless you Oh, I love that. And it's still a great answer, because you never know. It's being open to finding other things that might be bringing you joy. And it shows throughout this episode. You can just tell that your work does bring you joy. And I love that. There's life outside of the medical industry. There we go. I think you're definitely a success story for that. Thank you so much for today, Dupé. Where can people find you? And have you got anything to share that's coming next?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, funnily enough. I spend a lot of time on there now. That would be great if you could follow me there, and hopefully I can provide some insights and some value to your feed on a daily basis, mainly around my experience of entrepreneurship and leadership and careers as well. That's mainly what I talk about on there. Besides that, I've got a newsletter, and again, I just go a little bit deeper on some of those topics, and I'm loving building that out and growing a bit of a sort of newsletter community. So those are my two places.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. I'm so looking forward to see where Bloomful goes, seeing your personal brand grow even further, and it's been lovely to have you today. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. I've loved it.
Thank you so much for listening to Bump to Business Owner. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please do rate, review, follow, or subscribe wherever you're listening. It really helps us to connect with more mums and business owners. You can DM me on @BumpToBusinessOwner on Instagram, and I'll be back next week.